Anyone who's dabbled in gacha gaming is familiar with the silent blank slate MC, who typically suffers from amnesia, setting themselves up perfectly to be a self-insert for the audience. The setup is damn near a staple at this point. But as time has gone on and the gacha audience has grown, why do many developers still insist on the bland MCs of the FGOs and the CZNs when we can have successful gacha MCs like Wuthering Rover or the siblings from ZZZ? I'm Forte, and let's take a look at how the usual self-insert MC is holding gacha back. In gaming, the self-insert main character tends to be a guy made generically as possible without any notable details, and less personality than a stick of celery, inoffensive and easy to project onto. This type of MC is popular in gacha games due to two big reasons. One, the majority of gacha games become waifu collectors, and it's easier to build that connection without pesky details getting in the way like the main character's own preferences or opinions. There isn't anything inherently wrong with this if it serves a greater purpose. In the case of gacha games, there are usually elements of something similar to a dating sim, or a type of system that just naturally works better when the point of view character is just working more as an extension of the player. And reason two, due to the nature of gachas, the cast will always keep growing and growing until the game eventually shuts down. Many developers take the route of just giving all the shine to the characters that are introduced later, letting them steer the ship when their turn comes around. Writing just becomes so much more easier when you don't have to account for the constantly present protagonist being that much of a consequence for any scene that they're a part of. This is problematic, but I'll loop back around to this point later. Now, the concept of self-insert protagonists in gaming does have a really impressive history of crowd pleasers with characters like Link from Legend of Zelda, the Dragonborn from Skyrim, or Mr. Collab himself, Joker from Persona 5. You know these characters. You see them, you know how loved they are, but where is it that these characters in their games succeed where many gacha games fail? First, going over the characters themselves, one key difference lies in the general approach to design, especially since the worst of the offenders in this area don't even create characters to design. When you look at the most successful self-insert characters, or even characters in general, you'll immediately notice that they all have very recognizable shapes and elements that are a part of their design. For example, off the bat, I'm sure a lot of you already know exactly who this is. With nothing but a silhouette, the profile of the character is easy to remember and stands out as the Knight from Hollow Knight. Now, let's try another one. Now, this is such a great example of strong and recognizable design because there were so many versions of this character that I could have used, and still 99% of gamers would have called out the right answer regardless before I even got a word out. Both of these characters are as blank slate as you can get, more or less, with Link being one of the most popular characters of all time. Humans are visual creatures, and if we fall in love with the way something looks first, we will let you get away with failing in other areas. But we're not here to talk about my ass. What we can talk about though is liking and subscribing for more content and discussions like this. It helps me out a ton. Anyways, back to designs. As I mentioned before, gacha games with self-insert MCs tend to keep the designs a bit basic and simple with no real unique features. If we're being completely honest, some could pass as NPCs and no one would even bat an eye. In the most extreme cases, some gachas forego creating a design for the character altogether, like in Adrenaline, whose MC, the commander, has never even been revealed in the game's 9 years of runtime. The lack of a notable and constant character to catch the eye of the masses also ties into a gacha's ability to attract new players. From a purely marketing standpoint, having a recognizable and consistent mascot to throw around everywhere increases brand awareness, and since gachas are basically a revolving door of new characters, a well-designed MC becomes that much more important since they're going to be the one character that's guaranteed to be there from beginning to end. Usually. Gachas with bland self-inserts have to work that much harder to keep characters appealing and aesthetically on theme with the rest of the characters to some degree in order to create that association with the game. For example, Fate Grand Order has their work cut out for them here, since they have several characters like Gilgamesh, Saber, and Rin, whose identities are practically baked into the zeitgeist of the anime and gacha communities. Because of this, FGO doesn't need the MC to be a real character since they have the cast to succeed without him. The next key difference that a lot of the most successful self-insert characters have that makes them so appealing is the fact that they have unique gameplay elements that play into their status as the protagonist. Of course, this isn't needed in every title, but for the ones that can make it happen, I think it massively benefits the game and the interest in the MC. As I've touched on before, the MC is the one constant you can rely on being present from beginning to end, and giving them special gameplay mechanics is a surefire way to keep them relevant without even having to get into the game's plot. Though I have some gripes with the handling of the Traveler from Genshin Impact, Hoyo seems to have popularized the idea of the MC being able to swap between different elements. This ability allows the MC to stand out and maintain some semblance of relevancy due to their flexibility. And if you're Wuwa, it's just hype as hell. Some games push the element swapping concept even further and gives different elements specific roles, allowing the MC even more versatility. The protagonist for Honkai Star Rail, Trailblazer, has access to 5 different elements, each of which serves a different purpose. Now there is a bit of overlap between the oldest forms and the newer ones, but the majority of the forms for Trailblazer are considered to be among the best characters in the game, giving the main character more playtime throughout the course of the game. The concept of granting the MC a unique and tangible gameplay mechanic warrants some attention on its own, and puts them above the cookie-cutter self-insert. But when this can be done to a character that also has a level of agency in the world, you begin to see something special start to form. This brings me to the next and perhaps biggest key difference between a typical self-insert and a standout. The ability to take action in the story and be a competent participant without being a Mary Sue. And for those that need the quick explanation, it's not good to be a Mary Sue. They're usually portrayed as unrealistically perfect, overly competent, and they tend to never have any real flaws. Usually it's something like they care too much or they're too perfect. And typically, the closer to a non-character that the protagonist is, the more everyone around them starts to treat them as though they are perfect. As for the competency part, I mentioned having gripes with the Traveler from Genshin, and one of the biggest I have is how inconsequential and passive they seem to be. I was a Genshin launch player that stuck around for a little bit, and I continued to follow the major story beats a little bit after I left the game, but it seemed like the trend never really broke from what I had seen. The Traveler just reacted to whatever happened around them and let themselves be dragged around by the more interesting characters. Like I said from the start of the video, writing becomes a lot easier when you don't have to account for the constantly present protagonist being that much of a consequence in any scene that they're part of. And while Genshin definitely has some interesting characters to carry the show, a lot of potential is lost when there isn't a lead character to move around the world being a force of their own that others have to react to. This is where my previous examples like Link and Joker really shine because they kinda have to. Traditional game releases have one chance to get things right, and the audience usually has to shell out money just to play the games in the first place. So the self-insert characters there have way more at stake and need to appeal to the audience almost immediately. Gachas have the added benefit of being free and constantly updated with new plot lines and characters, so it's way too common for them to launch with a half-assed story and characters. And since a fair share of gachas rely on the self-insert character without any discernible features, we often do end up with an MC who can do everything that everyone loves without question. A really interesting example, and one that's going to be really important to me, is Rover from Wuthering Waves. At their core, Rover is still very much built from that amnesiac self-insert archetype, and this is especially clear in the 1.0 content when Wuwa was the victim of the aforementioned half-assed launch. But they did still possess some of the traits of what I consider to be a good self-insert MC. In 1.0, Rover had much weaker characterization and came across more of a Mary Sue that everyone just trusted with their life. Yet they still had glimmers of a personality that hinted at something more compelling, like their moments with Scar or Camellia. And while Rover was a lot more passive in the 1.0 story, the game hinted at a grander plot that suggested Rover had a much longer history with the world, which recontextualizes so much when you're constantly forced to wonder, has Rover been here before and who already knows them? Pretty much turning a lazy trope into an active mystery. From 2.0 onwards, Rover's characterization had them evolve into a caring hero that was willing to go out of their way to help, but was openly standoffish when faced with a sketchy situation. They're also portrayed as extremely strong and competent, but they know what it feels like to fail or need help, which gives other characters a time to shine. For example, in a minor spoiler warning for the 3.0 story, I think the beginning of the Amos story does such a great job fleshing out the character of Rover. They have real moments of vulnerability about their past home and relationships, and failing to save Amos in the first leg of the story was a moment that really hooked so many players. Despite Rover being very much their own character during this time, instead of asking what happened to Amos at the end, everyone was like, "Where's my daughter?" Kuro gave us a self-insert MC who still has a real presence and personality while giving enough space for the audience to project themselves onto the character. This is the new golden standard for the self-insert. There have been plenty of gachas that have shown that the MC can be actual characters and find success. Bell and Weiss from ZZZ, Burton from Reverse 1999, the Doctor from Arknight. All these characters are from beloved gacha games, and they all benefit from having interesting and compelling main characters to follow. Of course, I understand why a blank slate protagonist is used, and there will always be a place for them in the gacha space, but I think we have enough examples to show that the general audience is ready for a bit more. As someone who's been playing these games for over 10 years, I've literally spent nearly half my life watching gachas move into the mainstream and witness just how much more seriously they're being taken now. Just seeing the character writing go from non-existent or super simple to fleshed out and real, rivaling writing that's typically reserved for AAA games. It goes without saying that we do still have a long ways to go before gacha characters can start competing on the big stage, but the iron is hot, and there's no time like now to keep on striking. If you thought the video was cool, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe for more, and join us in the comments for some of the discussions. Is there any MC that I left out that you think is worth a mention? Or maybe you just want to vent about a particular one that really grinds your gears. But until the next one, this has been Pity Forte, and I'm out.